niggies on the next brand new Spongebob. Like this box's most scurvy scheme yet. As of now, the Krusty Krab is open 24 hours! Keep your eye out for a brand new SpongeBob SquarePants. Friday at 8:30 after a brand new Avatar.
Do you want to know exactly where SpongeBob went wrong? The day that Good Neighbors aired.
But instead, they take the proverbial route and decide to make it into a Squidward torture porn.
After the movie, this is Scumbob. You're watching Scumbob SquarePants.
Don't make me do this!
Takes control of Squidward's house and begins attacking the city. Fuck this episode!
How would you define the separate eras of SpongeBob SquarePants? A lot of people think that the show had a resurgence during season 9 or 10 or 11, and a lot of people are saying that it got bad again at season 12. There's a lot of debate this day and age, but for a few years, about a decade ago, that wasn't much the case. Pretty much the entire fandom was in agreement. There was a golden era, the first 3 seasons. And everything from season 4 onward was bad. Pre-movie era versus post-movie era. Classic SpongeBob versus modern SpongeBob. Different words for the same idea. Today, most people are softer on season 4, and even season 5 to an extent. It's clear that that particular hatred was overhyped. While there are definitely a few bad episodes in season 4, and a lot of those episodes are worse than anything from the 3 classic seasons, there are also a lot of really good episodes that can go toe-to-toe with the best of them. And now I think that's where opinion lies this day and age. To the point where I think a lot of people don't realize how hated season 4 of SpongeBob actually was. And even the people that were there probably don't realize why season 4 was hated for so long. So, today we're gonna dive into some fandom history and figure out why SpongeBob season 4 was as hated as it was for so long. In 2004, SpongeBob SquarePants was probably the most popular cartoon on the planet. Definitely the most popular on Nickelodeon. Hardly anyone had anything bad to say about it. The only real critique you got back then was from moral guardians fear-mongering about its influence.
Clearly, Nickelodeon is pushing a global warming agenda.
Even though this was before the age of social media, SpongeBob fans did get together and communicate over the internet. It was an age of forums and fan sites, where anyone who wanted to talk about something they liked would just make a whole website about it. SpongeBob was so popular that it had dozens of these. But back then, only 3 really stood out. United SpongeBob, SpongeBuddy, and SpongeBob Mania. If those last 2 sound familiar, it's because they merged in 2004, becoming SpongeBuddy Mania, the biggest SpongeBob fan site that's still active to this day. Looking back at old posts from the era, the 2 forums had a very different attitude towards the season. SpongeBuddy Mania was very positive about season 4. United SpongeBob, however, was a lot more critical. Complaints from the time are the ones you've heard time and again. People thought that season 4 was less funny, too fast-paced, and that it just felt off. And most people, even at the time, attributed this to Steven Hillenburg leaving the show, along with several key writers. However, the sentiment in general was still largely positive, regardless of what website you were on. At the height of SpongeBob hatred, most critics say that they stopped watching around season 5, or early into season 6, not season 4. Pie Guy Rule's last straw was the season 5 episode Spongehenge, and my own personal last straw was The Splinter, which was early on into season 6. So, what exactly happened? What made people turn on season 4 so harshly? No one really points to any particular season 4 episode as that absolute last straw. Well, maybe with one exception.
Oh, ahoy there! I be Patsy the Pirate, and I'm welcoming you to the best day ever!
In November 2006, Nickelodeon announced the Best Day Ever Marathon. It was, by far, the biggest event in SpongeBob history at the time, except for maybe the release of the first movie. The idea was brilliant. The network would air the top 100 SpongeBob episodes, voted for by fans online. And after that, they would air a brand new episode, the best episode ever, the best day ever. And to top it off, it would be the first time that the SpongeBob movie would ever air on television. This should have gone incredibly well. I mean, corporate probably got what they wanted. During the marathon, Nickelodeon held an average of more than 6 million viewers at any given time. This seems even more insane when you realize that part of the marathon aired overnight. It was a huge success, and it was also the worst kind of success. Let's talk about some of the specifics and why this marathon ended up being so controversial. Most of the quote-unquote best episodes supposedly voted on by the fans were mostly from Season 4. Meanwhile, many of the fan-favorite episodes from previous seasons like One Crab's Trash, Squidville, Wet Painters, and Sailor Mouth were either low on the list or not there at all. This becomes even stranger when you realize that between the first 4 seasons, there were only about 150 episode segments total. On Friday, November 10th, 2006, at 7:30 p.m., the episode Best Day Ever premiered. You ever watch that Hey Arnold episode, The List? It's basically a worse version of that. SpongeBob randomly decides that today is going to be the best day ever. And what does the best day ever consist of? The things he does literally every single day. Grilling Krabby Patties, karate with Sandy, things you've seen on the show a million times. The episode itself is poorly constructed. We have Patrick acting like an uncaring jerk, the episode is very repetitive, Squidward performing on a stage to applause, and also inviting SpongeBob to watch with a VIP seat are both out of character. Also, the episode isn't funny.
Oh, I know! I'll just sneak in the back door!
Oh, no, you don't!
SpongeBob, you are so...
Ticket, please.
It's also only 11 minutes long. All of this hype for 11 minutes. There are a couple of gags that are amusing, but the episode as a whole is just so dull that it's not even worth caring about. Or, it wouldn't be if not for its context. You know, being the most overhyped episode in television history. The only part of the episode that is remotely memorable is the song, which wasn't even written for this episode. It came from the SpongeBob movie soundtrack, which was released 2 years prior to the episode's airing. So, this new episode was a disappointment at best. All that was left was finding out which episode was chosen to be the best SpongeBob episode of all time, the final episode of this marathon. At 7:45, the winner of this marathon was revealed to be Karate Island, a move that single-handedly made it one of the most hated SpongeBob SquarePants episodes of the past 20 years. For what it's worth, Karate Island is an okay episode. It's got a lot of good action, and there are some decently funny gags. It also gives Sandy a lot of screen time, which was nice, at least at the time. That particular aspect is harder to appreciate, as one aspect of the show's seasonal rot was making Sandy overly competent compared to other characters. And it's hard not to see the seeds of it here. It's not a perfect episode, far from it. SpongeBob himself is really vain and smug for almost no reason. He's just called the King of Karate and it bloats his ego to unlikable levels. So, for the first half of the episode, he's just acting like an asshole to Sandy.
Sandy, Sandy, Sandy. Mr. Udon isn't interested in a karate novice like you. He only has time for royalty.
But other than that, the episode is alright. It is not number one. And I don't think that anyone in history has ever called Karate Island the best episode of SpongeBob. I don't think that anyone in history has called Karate Island the best episode of SpongeBob Season 4. Online polls can get some strange results sometimes, but it's hard to believe that this episode was actually voted for as the best. Like I said, it's not bad, but it's an episode that doesn't have many people praising it. Not now, and especially not then. And yet, to end off this 24-hour marathon, Nickelodeon told 8 million live viewers that Karate Island and Best Day Ever were the best episodes SpongeBob had to offer. Just a few months later, Season 5 premiered, leaving the Best Day Ever marathon as the spiritual finale to an already contentious season. Almost immediately, people were online expressing their frustration with this marathon. Suspicions that the whole thing was rigged were abound. It wasn't the prevailing opinion, especially on SpongeBob Mania, but for many people, this was the first time they felt not just disinterested with Season 4, but actively frustrated by it. As 06 turned into 07, more and more fans just felt disillusioned with Season 4. They saw it as a sign of the show's downfall. And throughout the year, people who hated the post-movie era became established as a legitimate subset of the fan base. They started making forum posts and eventually even videos explaining their perspectives. Even the people who exclusively gushed about the show started to pay attention. As the 2000s came to a close and the SpongeBob fanbase entered the social media age, this vocal minority was eager to jump to websites like YouTube.
Hey guys, Pygar Rules here, and I am recording this in the year 2009, which means that, hey, it's SpongeBob's birthday, yay! Now, I don't really care about specifically what month SpongeBob started, but the point is, he's been around for the majority of my life, so I figure I'd do a little rant on him.
In September 2009, Pie Guy Rules released what appears to be the first ever YouTube video discussing SpongeBob's decline.
The problem that I have isn't that it's gotten bad recently, it's just that it's just been such a big decline, and that if Nickelodeon keeps this rate up, SpongeBob will be a terrible show. I mean, as it is, it's pushing it with its, 7th season? It really shouldn't still be going on. They air it way too much. There's too many episodes aired in a single day. I mean, if you were to go through and count, I'm sure there's at least 6 episodes.
However, it wouldn't be until 2012 when this discourse went from just being popular within the fandom to being the mainstream opinion. The first videos focused on SpongeBob criticism to go outright viral were 2 top 20 worst episode lists released by a YouTube poop channel, Mobro Studios.
Like a great number of fans out there, I feel the comedic powerhouse SpongeBob SquarePants began slipping in quality after the film's release, and in the subsequent seasons, many mediocre and detestable episodes were spawned. From these I have selected 20 of the most abysmal episodes ever to hit the air.
The lists garnered hundreds of thousands of views, numbers unheard of for cartoon content at the time.
Now, if this was just between SpongeBob and Patrick, they probably would have come up with a much better episode. But instead, they take the proverbial route and decide to make it into a Squidward torture porn.
Between the 2 lists, 6 of those 40 episodes were from Season 4, and Karate Island specifically was ranked at number 5 on the fan edition list.
The sense of badness really starts to set in when SpongeBob suddenly begins acting like an arrogant douchebag. Instead of suggesting gender equality, it suggests girls are god-bodied and boys are helpless pricks. I also feel a lot of people hate this episode for taking the top spot on the SpongeBob Top 100.
Best Day Ever was number 19 on the original list. By 2013, rants and reviews about how SpongeBob SquarePants wasn't as good as it used to be were blowing up. Many of my own most popular videos to this day are from 2013 and 2014, talking about the most hated episodes of the show. And I wasn't the only one on that train either. Most people who talked about cartoons at the time had something to say about SpongeBob, and many more people started posting videos exclusively to talk about its decline.
In order to honor the dim-witted, Nimrod moves Nickelodeon's been making to stifle all creativity left on their network, let's check out the top 6 worst SpongeBob episodes.
And the general consensus was that Season 4 is when it all went downhill, that it was mediocre, mixed, or outright bad. I think Pie Guy Rules summarized the popular opinion best in his review of SpongeBob Season 1.
I think it's safe to say that Seasons 1 through 3 were good seasons, Season 4 was split, and Seasons 5 and onwards are all bad.
He would declare the season meh in 2014.
There's definitely way too many ScumBob and meh episodes to call it a good season, so I'm gonna call it a meh season.
While some people did defend Season 4 as a whole, myself included, public opinion dictated that Season 4 was the start of SpongeBob's bad era for the remainder of the decade. Recently though, I don't see too many people hating on Season 4. Many of the people who were popular in the cartoon community of the early 2010s have either retired, lost influence, or stopped talking about SpongeBob in lieu of more recent cartoons. There are definitely some people who still think that Season 4 is a part of SpongeBob's downfall, particularly on YouTube, but many others have come to see Season 4 as not just a good season, but a part of SpongeBob's classic era. And that's probably for the best. Season 4 definitely isn't as consistent as the previous seasons, and it is where we started seeing some of the really bad episodes like Good Neighbors or Gift of Gum, but it's also home to some of the most beloved episodes to this day, like Krusty Towers or Dunces and Dragons, Skill Crane, Have You Seen the Snail? Much of the hatred of the season came from how Nickelodeon treated it, more than the season itself. Looking at things entirely like a corporate enterprise might be good for the bottom line, but even when it works, especially when it works, it can have long-reaching consequences you probably didn't intend and didn't even want. For almost 2 decades, SpongeBob Season 4 was hated, largely as a backlash to Nickelodeon trying to milk the franchise dry, and the cynicism spurred many people to share their negative feelings on it, which probably didn't help numbers in the long run as the consensus became SpongeBob isn't good anymore. What the consensus on SpongeBob is now is hard to tell in many regards. Most people agree that Seasons 6 and 7 are the worst, but where does Season 5 fall in all of this? And what about Season 8? And Seasons 12 and 13 are a discussion in and of themselves. I don't even know what to call this current era. It doesn't feel appropriate to call it modern SpongeBob anymore. But those are discussions for another video. SpongeBob has a long and storied history, and even with the less than stellar moments, I'm happy to have been a part of it. Even with all of its peaks and valleys, I know I wouldn't be where I am without this show. And although things are uncertain at the moment, it's one of the few shows that has truly managed to transcend generations in ways that few others can only hope to. I wish it the best for the future, whatever that future brings.